Yeah. Will you pray? Freddie is running for political office. He's shaking hands, kissing the babies. Vote for Walker. Good morning. We're glad you're here. What's today? This is the day which Jehovah has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. So we're going to rejoice. We're going to be glad that we're here. We're going to leave here a little bit better than we were when we came. And we're going to encourage each other and love each other and help each other along this difficult way of life, right? Right. Y'all are going to buy into that, right? Okay, let's do it. Jason Fikes is visiting with us again. Always good to see you, Jason. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us, and we're glad that you're here. Jason's going to lead us in a word of prayer, and then we'll get into our study of the book of Mark. Jason, pray for us. Let's pray together. Thank you. Amen. I want to revisit real quickly the text that we covered last week, and I told you I was going to cover this part, and I didn't. And it was about David eating the showbread and so forth. You remember that, and Jesus said, there is something greater here than the temple. And I told you I was going to come back to that, and I didn't because that's not in Mark, and so I just omitted to do that. But I want to just back up to that real quickly. Something greater than the temple is here. Well, what is the something that is greater than the temple? And I'm going to give you Richie's opinion real quick, and then you'll need to go and do your own personal private investigation. The something that is greater than the temple which was there was his disciples' obligation to serve him. It was greater than the priest's obligation to serve the people in the temple. And so that was his justification for his disciples eating the grain on the Sabbath day, was because they had an obligation to serve him. And they needed energy to do that. And so this was greater even. Their obligation to serve him was greater than the priest's obligation to serve the people in the temple. All right, so that brings us to chapter 3 in the book of Mark. Let me get this. All right, here's our text, and we've got parallels to Mark 3, 1 through 6, both in Matthew and in Luke, and I think it would be helpful for us, first of all, just to read these parallels and see the fill-ins and the helpful additional information that they give us. So let's go back to Matthew chapter 12, and read his record of this incident. If I can get back to 12, there we are. Verse 9 in Matthew 12. And he departed thence and went into their synagogue, and behold, a man having a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him? And he said unto them, What man shall there be of you that shall have one sheep, and if this fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? What's the answer? Of course they would. How much then is a man of more value than a sheep? Do y'all see Jesus' argument from the lesser to the greater? And Jesus did this often. He'd argue from the lesser to the greater, sometimes from the greater to the lesser. But here he's making an argument from the lesser to the greater. If they are justified on the Sabbath day to get a sheep out of a pit, and is not Jesus justified to heal this man on the Sabbath day? Which is of greater value, a sheep or a man? You see the force of Jesus' argument there. Wherefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath day. Is this too loud? Okay. Then said he to the man, stretch forth your hand, and he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole as the other. But the Pharisees went out and took counsel against him, how they might destroy him. Let's go over to Luke chapter 6. Beginning at verse 6, came to pass on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught. Luke is the only one, interestingly enough, who tells us that Jesus was teaching on this occasion. So here's one of those little gaps, the additional information that we get from the other writers. There was a man there with his right hand withered. Luke is the only one that tells us it was his right hand. Why do you think that might have been of interest to Luke? He's a doctor. He's going to be probably taking notice of such things as these. So Luke gives us a couple of little added insights here. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find how to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts, and he said to the man that had his hand withered, rise up and stand forth in the midst. Luke's again the only one that tells us that. Why do you think Jesus had him stand up and put him in the middle of the synagogue? What? He's right there in full view. Everybody can see what's going on, and he's prominent now, right? I mean, he's standing up, he's prominent, and what's going to happen here is very, very obvious and visible to everyone that was there. And Jesus said unto them, I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to destroy it? And he looked round about on them all and said unto them, stretch forth your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with madness and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. Okay, those are the parallels. We'll try to endorse them or induct them into this reading as we go along, as we see that it's necessary. So, having done that, let's begin to look at this text. As I often do, I kind of like to real quickly kind of clear away a little brush, if you will, and just kind of make some statements concerning this text that are of interest to me. And there are several statements here that, again, jump out at me that are very, very noticeable. They watched him. They're watching him, right? They got their eyes on this guy. They're watching him. What's he going to do? And then you come down. I can't even see my own underlining there. That they might accuse him. So they're watching him in order to accuse him. You come down later, and they took counsel against him how they might destroy him. So there are three kind of just noticeable things to me that these men are doing and will do. They're watching him. But are they watching him out of pure or impure motives? Their motives are impure. They're looking for something that this guy's going to do or going to say that they think will cause him to stumble, that they can use against him and accuse him or bring some accusation against him, of course, of violating the law, so that they could charge him with this. And after, of course, the incident is done, they took counsel against him. The Pharisees will become confederate with the Herodians in this case. I think the Herodians, as I recall, somebody help me if they know, I think the Herodians are only mentioned like once or twice. The Herodians, as best I can understand, were a political party that was aligned with King Herod and on his side. And of course, King Herod was not well thought of among the Jews, being a kind of a Roman ally. And it's kind of interesting here that you have the Pharisees, who are very strongly Jewish and very traditional Jews, and you got them becoming confederate with the Herodians, who are this political party of Herod. But you know the old saying, your enemy is my enemy, and that makes us common enemy. But the Pharisees weren't above aligning themselves with even those that they didn't agree with, apparently and obviously, if they could get to Jesus. And I highlighted the word how there because I think that's significant to me. They took counsel how they might destroy him. Now, were they taking counsel to destroy him? I'm speaking probably in very specific terms here, and I know you haven't had a chance to think over this like I've thought over it. They've already decided they're going to have to kill this guy, right? They're putting out a contract on Jesus. We got to eliminate this guy. We just don't know how to get this done. So they're counseling, they're scheming, they're having these meetings on how they're going to get this done with, I guess, the least amount of trouble in getting it done. But they've already decided we got to eliminate this guy. He's got to go. It's just the how of doing it that they haven't decided. So those are just kind of interesting things in the text that jumped out to me. But there's another one here that has to do with Jesus. He looked around about on them. Jesus is watching them too. So everybody's watching everybody, right? And Jesus looked around about on them with anger. That's a strong Greek term. It's the Greek word orge. This is a strong term for anger and wrath. Very strong. But coupled with that emotion, you see another emotion that is motivating Jesus here because of his anger. He was grieved. Yeah. Anybody here got children? Do sometimes in us dealing with our children, do we have these two emotions? We get angry at our kids because of some of the stupid stuff they do, but we're sorry, at the same time. So Jesus, he's angry here, but his anger is driven by his grief because they are so hard in heart that they would put a sheep above a man, and they would put their traditional views of observing the law above doing good for this man because it's the Sabbath day. And of course they're hypocritical and inconsistent because surely they would do this for a sheep, but they won't allow Jesus to do it for a man. So Jesus looked round about on them with anger. I think, if memory serves me right, this is the only time that the Bible talks about Jesus being angry. Now, he got frustrated. He got frustrated with those disciples. Golly, guys, don't you guys get it yet? How long have I got to be with you? How long is it going to take you guys to get it? And they didn't get it for a long time. So Jesus got frustrated. And every time I read texts like these and have thoughts like those I've just shared with you, I know there are times that I've caused those emotions in Jesus. Lonnie, how could you have done something so stupid as that? And I'm sure that I've caused the anger of the Lord to be aroused from time to time, but probably it's driven a lot by grief because of my hardness of heart and my lack of understanding. So, I think personally, I know about you, but I think there are a lot of things like this that I can identify somewhat with these things that are going on. So let's go back and let's walk through this text. And I think this is probably about all we're going to be able to cover when we get through this. He entered again into the synagogue. I think Matthew calls this their synagogue, probably just a local synagogue of the Jews. I don't know if that means the one in Capernaum because it says the synagogue. I don't know, but it's a Jewish synagogue. It's not very important, I guess, for us to know where it was. There was a man there who had his hand withered. What does it mean that this man's hand was withered? Do you have some idea? Anybody here remember Frank Arney? Maybe a lot of you don't remember Frank Arney. Frank Arney and his wife were members here for a long, long time. I knew Frank and his wife very well, is in their home quite often. Frank had a withered right hand. His fingers were drawn up into his palm, and he couldn't open his hand. Now, he could move his arm, and apparently this man can move his arm because he stretches it forth, right? But Frank had that kind of hand. I don't know what caused it, but the word withered means to dry up. And so probably somehow for lack of flow of fluids into this man's right hand, his fingers had just drawn up into his palm, and basically he didn't have use of his right hand. That's what withered means. And they watched him, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. So again, their motives are very impure here. Do you and I need to watch Jesus? We need to watch Jesus, right? We all need to keep an eye on Jesus. We need to keep focused on Jesus. We need to keep Jesus in the middle, right? Keep Jesus in the middle of your marriage will be fine. Keep Jesus in the middle of your business will be fine. Keep Jesus in the middle of your congregation will be fine. Keep Jesus in the middle of your mind will be all right, right? Keep Jesus in the middle. We need to watch Jesus, but we need to watch him for different motives than these men watched him. But I think Jesus wants us to take a look at him, and you and I as Christians are made to be seen. Even so, let your light shine before men that they may see your good works. I want to be seen, don't y'all? That they may glorify your Father who is in heaven. So that's what should drive us. Not so we are seen for ourselves, but rather so that people can see Jesus in us and then glorify God because of the life that we live, right? That's the right kind of motive. So if they're watching him, they want to find something to accuse him of, and they're going to find it. You know, if you look for something like that, you're likely to find it. And he said unto the man that had his hand withered, stand forth. And we said that Luke tells us, stand forth in the midst becomes very, very obvious. He said unto them, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to kill? But they held their peace. Now, we read the other records, and I think in the other records, and I think in Matthew in particular, if you look at the other record, you'll find out why they held their peace. Why did they hold their peace? Was this the best posture for them to take? It was the only smart one. It was really the only one they could take. Why did they hold their peace? Because of Jesus' illustration. What do you guys do on the Sabbath? Now, if you've got a sheep, you got one sheep, and that sheep falls into a pit on the Sabbath day, what are you going to do? You're going to rescue that sheep. So if you're putting such a value on a sheep that you, by your traditions, violate the Sabbath day to save it, what about saving a man or healing a man? You can't meet that argument. Let me tell you, folks, the best thing to do is be quiet, because nothing you say is going to help you. And so they were very astute, very smart. They just didn't answer. Here's the idea that I get. You go back to Matthew, and it says they asked him this question. Here it says Jesus asked them the question. How might we reconcile that seeming contradiction? It's very possible this question was asked twice. It's very possible that they posed it first when they saw what was going on. Is it lawful for you to heal this man on the Sabbath day? They watched him. They see what he's doing. And they saw something in Jesus' movements or whatever that he's going to do something with this man with the withered hand. And so they said, wait a minute now, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Jesus then countered with that sheep story. What about that? Now, having heard that, guys, let me pose the question to you. Having heard that, now you answer the question. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Did the Sabbath day allocate such a restriction that Jesus violated the law by doing this on the Sabbath day? We talked about this in the eating of the grain and so forth. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? So the Sabbath was made to serve man, not man to be the abject slave of the Sabbath day. And of course, the Sabbath day did not forbid all labor, all doing of good, or any doing of good. It forbade unnecessary labor, which was a man's ordinary occupation by which he earned his living or his livelihood. Jesus is violating nothing about the law of the Sabbath as given by Moses, but he is violating their traditions by which they have bound the Sabbath law. Church, are we listening? We need to listen. Do we in the churches of Christ have traditions? Are traditions in and of themselves bad things? No. They can be good things. They become bad things when we, like the Pharisees, elevate them to the position of law and we begin to bind them on others as though they were sacred. Traditions are okay. Now, there are apostolic traditions of which Paul spoke, which are of a different character and nature. But, church, listen, we have to be careful that we don't fall into the same pit that these Pharisees were in. And we begin to make our traditions into law and begin to bind them on folks when Jesus would not have us do that. Y'all follow what I'm saying? And the reason I say this is not to beat us up. I love the church. I hope y'all know that. I love the church. I'm where I need to be. I'm in the church of Christ because this is where I choose to be. And I choose to be here because I think that's where Jesus has told me that I need to be. I love the church dearly. But I also, I think, have been in the church long enough to recognize that sometimes we fall into this fault. And I want us to avoid that. I want us to be loving toward one another and yielding to one another and not, place such an importance on our traditions that we start to bind them as though they were lost. So I think this is kind of what happened. They asked him, he said, okay, now I've given that illustration, answer the question. So he threw it right back at them. And as I said, they were smart to hold their peace. And when he had looked round about on them with anger, is anger a bad emotion? Is anger a godly emotion? Yep, it is. I quit watching the news, folks. It just made me angry. I just don't need all that business, I just couldn't watch the news without getting angry. And I don't need all of that stress in my life. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's a godly emotion. God gets angry. God is a jealous God. God has those emotions and attitudes. There's nothing wrong with anger as long as we don't let anger get out of control, as long as we control it. And certainly, if it were wrong, then Jesus would be wrong on this occasion, and we know for sure that he's not. So he was angry because of the hardening of their hearts and how they placed more value on a sheep than they did the healing of this poor man with the withered hand. So he said unto the man, stretch forth your hand. And so I assume he stretched his hand out, and he stretched it forth, and his hand was restored. The word restored here means to put back in its previous condition. Now, just guessing, what do you think its previous condition was? Well, I think as Matthew says, whole as the other. So I'm going to draw an assumption from that this hand is restored to its previous condition, which was quite normal and natural, just like his other hand was, to its full use and function, just like his left hand was. There was something else I was going to point out there. Yeah. I forget. I'll think of it in a moment. Now, did Jesus touch him? Doesn't say he did. Doesn't say he touched him. Did Jesus say anything more than Stretch your hand forward. Record doesn't say he did. But upon Jesus' command for this man to stretch it out and his compliance to Jesus, stretch it out, his hand was restored. This is a remarkable miracle. And it's right there in the synagogue. It's right in the middle of the church building. It's right in the middle of Sunday morning assembly. The preacher's about to get up and preach, and this happened right in the midst of the congregation. Everybody sees it. It's an obvious miracle. Nobody can deny that this thing has happened, and they must have been stirred by it. And the Pharisees were, because they wanted something for which to accuse him. And the Pharisees went out, and straightway with the Herodians, those are those political allies of the Herods, took counsel against him how they might destroy him. And I think we talked about that. They've already made up their minds that this guy's got to be eliminated, but they're going to get some counsel. That's the conspiracy, isn't it? They are conspiring against Jesus to get rid of him. We're just not sure how to do that most conveniently and with the greatest of ease. And so they're going to counsel together. So here's another example of where Jesus has turned their very arguments on them. He's shown how foolish their arguments are, how illegitimate, inconsistent, and illogical they are, and how the Sabbath does not forbid him to do these good things. There's also the law, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And that's a pretty high law, right? And I think that also comes into play right here. All right, any questions? Good, y'all are right with me. I got some. Since you didn't have any, I got some. All right. I want you to think with me, and there are really no wrong answers here. We're just talking here. So this is not, a question that's going to determine your Bible knowledge or anything like that, or how right or wrong you might be. It's just some thought questions that I want you to contemplate on this text. Because when I read this, I want to go over this thing, and as I said, I wrestle a little bit with God, and I try to get out of this text everything that I hope that I can. How important is motive or attitude in our relationship to Jesus? You think motive and attitude is pretty important? I do too. It's not everything. I don't want to, put that on it, but it's very important. Why I do what I do, and the attitude that drives what we do and how it affects our relationship to Jesus. There have been many times, I can confess to you in my ministerial experience and career, that I did some wrong things. And I know y'all find that impossible to believe. But really, there were times when, Bill, I did a thing or two that was probably not wrong. But as I look back at it, I think my motives were good. So at least I had that going for me. God told David it was good that it was in your heart to build that temple. But you're not going to get to build it. So motive and attitude, these are important. And if we have right motives and attitudes, if we need to adjust them, what will we do? We'll adjust them, right? We need to make adjustments. If we're honest, we'll make the adjustments that we need to make. These guys had a very bad attitude toward Jesus. And if you have that kind of attitude, you're going to find something wrong. If you come to assembly on Sunday morning to find something that the preacher says that is wrong, you're going to find something that he says is wrong. It's all about attitude, motive. Does this text imply that not doing good when we have the ability and opportunity is equivalent to doing wrong? What do you think about that? I would tend to agree with that, but I'm going to waffle a little bit on you with this next question. See, I set you up, okay? I think you're right. You probably draw that conclusion. You could do good. You have the opportunity, the ability, don't do it. It's kind of tantamount to doing wrong. When is it wrong to do good? Or is it ever wrong to be good? Now watch, there's a hook in this one. I got Proverbs 3:27 up there. Withhold not from them. Let's see. Somebody got it? Proverbs. Withhold not from them to whom it is. Somebody help me. I can't quote it now.
Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act.
Okay. Withhold not. Say it again. Let me quote it as you go along so everybody can hear it.
Do not withhold good
Do not withhold good
from those to whom it is due
from those to whom it is due
when it is in your power to act.
when it is in your power to act. What's the key word in that passage?
Power.
Huh? Power? Okay. What? Due. To whom it is due. Does that then imply there are some to whom it is not due? Think about it. Think about it. I can't hear you. Well, that's the question. Yeah. Jason, you were going to share something.
This is one of those really, Jesus' actions here is frustrating. He knows that they want to kill him and that they're watching him, and he intentionally does this miracle in a room with people who he knows. Now, I want to know why he did that. Why does he stir the pot? Doesn't he have enough political sense to just not mess with them? Why didn't he just ignore their tradition and just let them keep doing what they have always been doing? Why does he set this example for us that we should trample on traditions when people are neglecting those? Why does he do this? That's where
That's a good question. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. Can you help us?
Well, I'm a little frightened that if you elevate tradition where you're hurting people over tradition, then Jesus is setting an example that
Then maybe you need to be stirred up a little?
we might need that confrontation.
Yeah, I think you got a good point.
He's grieving at their hardness of heart,
Yeah,
and he has to confront.
that's a good point. That's a good point. And I think there's a good lesson in that for us. That sometimes just things need to be confronted, don't they? And you're gonna, it always bothered Jesus tremendously because he upset folks. He didn't want to rock the boat or cause any waves, right? Lord, do you know that those guys, when you said that, they were offended? Jesus said, let them alone. The blind will guide the blind. Yes, ma'am.
Was he really stirring the pot, or was he demonstrating his will?
Well, I would say, I wouldn't deny he's doing both. I think Jason's got a good point. I mean, he could have avoided this whole thing. He could have avoided the thing in the grain field. He could have avoided the thing about casting out demons. He could have avoided the whole thing. In my opinion, the most controversial person who ever walked the face of this planet was Jesus Christ. Everywhere he went, he caused controversy. He violated protocol. He wasn't always bound by the protocol of others. But I think Jason has a good point here. I think he's teaching a lesson. He's trying to teach not only a lesson to them, but also to us as well, that sometimes in order for us, shall I say, to get out of our tendencies, if we have them, I'm not making accusations, I'm just throwing this out. If we have tendencies to bind our opinions on others, that we need to look at that very carefully. And maybe we need to be jolted a little bit to see that that's wrong before we move out of it. Oh, no. Sue, we wouldn't do that. I think you're exactly right. Yeah. Let me, we just got a little while. Let me project something on this when I ask this question. Is it wrong to do good, or is it ever wrong to do good? I go through a lot of intersections in our city and county. And at a good number of those, I will see someone with a sign. Y'all know what I'm talking about. There have been a few times, but very few times, that I will hand those people cash. I just don't do it. And sometimes when I don't, I feel bad about that, because have I got $5 in my pocket I can spare? Yeah. But I'm just leery that I may not really be doing good to that person, but bad, by supporting them when they're capable of working for themselves. Now, are there people out there who are suffering from misfortune? Yes, they are. But again, I think we have a dual obligation here that becomes very difficult, at least for me to deal with. When is it proper or right for me to contribute to that person, and when is it wrong? It's just my habit. I don't. Now, I have gone by. We were going to church at Kleinwood one Sunday morning, Linda and I, to visit with our family, and there was a man begging on the street corner. And I told him, I said, wait right there, I'll be back. I took Linda to the church building. I told my family what I was doing. I turned around and went back to that man, and I said, what do you need? He said, I'm hungry. I said, meet me at McDonald's. There was a McDonald's right down the road. And I said, I will give you, I will buy for you a breakfast, but I won't give you cash. But there's no reason, in my opinion, for anybody in America to go hungry. So I will buy you food. So I bought him a breakfast. I don't hesitate to do that. But I just have a real problem with just handing over cash. That's me. And I'm not binding that view on anybody else. But I think there can be times when it can be wrong to do good. Because if by the doing of good you're really contributing to somebody's laziness. Y'all follow that? Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I'll just press on this one a little. So there's a guy with a withered hand. He's on the perimeter, right? And I mean, Jesus' word has come here. So if there's any place that withered or hurting people can come, it can be to God's people.
Good point.
And
Excellent.
whatever inconvenient it might be to us to have him in our presence, he won't let that stand. Come here.
But this ought to be a healing place.
That's
It ought to be a helping place. You're exactly. Good point. Excellent point. Did y'all hear that? All right, real quickly. Do we sometimes condemn others for what we justify in ourselves? Pharisees were condemning Jesus for helping this man while they're justifying themselves and getting that one sheep out of a pit or a ditch. Do we sometimes tend in that direction, unfortunately?
I know a ton of people that like dogs more than people.
Say it again.
I know a ton of people that like dogs more than people.
I do. Listen, one of my granddaughters is here, so she can hear. You know, now she used to do this. She's a grown lady now, so I understand this. But listen, if my granddaughters, when they were 2 or 3 years old, got as excited when I came home as my dog does, they'd still be in the will. Listen, there is something to this. Now, just think about this. There's something to it. The word God is dog spelled backward. There's something to this, people. No, I'm teasing you, but yeah, you're right. Sometimes yeah, you're right. All right, real quickly. Is it always wrong to be angry? No. Paul says, "Be ye angry and sin not." If we can control our anger, anger control is a good thing. And in Richie's opinion, I think I've said this before. I know I've said it before. I don't know if you've heard it. But in Richie's opinion, if there are some things in this world that happen that can't make you angry, something wrong with you. I get angry when somebody goes into one of our schools and shoots the place up. I get angry. Something wrong with our society. I get angry when old folks are taken advantage of by some crook. I get angry. And I think it's right to get angry at those things. And if we don't get angry at that stuff, I just wonder if we're as godly as well to be. That's just Richie's opinion. All right. What sterling counsel is found in these words? Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, which is Ephesians 4:26. Is there some sterling counsel there? I think there is, and I think that, again, kind of gets back to this idea of controlling our anger and taking care of issues and not going to bed with all of this extra baggage, lying upon us, or however the right phrase is. But it's a beautiful text. There's a lot to it, and Jason, thank you for bringing out those points. Very, very good, and we appreciate you sharing them with us. But the church is a place where people should be welcome, right? And the church is a place where people can come to be healed. This is a healing place. It's a sharing place. It's a compassionate place. And we need to be very receptive and have wide open arms to people who are in need, people who don't look like us, don't talk like us, and are different than we are. You know that the Chinese are wrong because they read a book backwards? You know how wrong the Chinese are? They just wrong for doing that, right? Well, the Chinese are over in China saying those Americans are wrong because they read a book from, front to back. You see what I'm saying? We're different people. We do things differently, and we shouldn't let those be issues that get in our way of loving each other, caring for each other, and helping each other along the way. We need each other, don't we? And people in our community need this church and people who have the mind of Christ, who are willing to help others, even if it stirs some folks up. All right? Thank you. You are paroled. You are dismissed, discharged. We'll take about a 15 or 20 minute break, and then we'll reassemble for corporate worship.